Yo, 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 people and patrons of the night, it is your boy back again with the kids' horror content, The Horror Lander. So I've been covering a lot of new adult horror books because that's sort of what I've been in the mood for. Been wanting some more scary, high action stuff. And then when I do go into kids' horror, it's been mostly visiting Goosebumps discussion topics. But I decided to go back to reading kids' horror books. And instead of going to Goosebumps or one of the main ones, I decided, all right, let me go to some of the, I guess, Goosebump homage series, spin-off series, knockoff series. And I decided to go to the modern age because I've heard sort of word around the block on a series called Monsterstreet, which is a modern kids horror book series which is inspired off of Goosebumps and other minded kind of stuff. And I'd heard good things about it, generally good things from some reviewers that I respect and know of. So I decided to randomly just pick up one of the books, which I ended up finding out is the very first book in the series, coincidentally. And I decided, hey man, might as well give it a read, might as well check out some of the hype behind the series. And I gotta say, after just finishing the book pretty much 8 minutes ago, I am genuinely pleased reading this book. Okay, now there's some, I guess, slight negatives in the book or things that kind of hold it back from being very great. But some of the writing qualities of this kid's horror book, some of the content in there, there are things in here that you would not see on average from things like Goosebumps books or other sort of like ballpark kind of reads. And I read a lot of Goosebumps books, so I kind of know what typically you find in them. So that shocked me. I was very happy to see that the author of this series, JH Reynolds, was branching out and kind of doing things a little bit different and adding that higher quality to it. So without further ado, let me talk about this book. First, I'll be going over a brief plot synopsis and then going into my thoughts for the positives, the negatives, and overall, pretty much the very good experience that I had with it. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get into the book review. So the book today that I'm talking about, as you've seen from the title, is book number 1 of Monsterstreet, which came back out in 2019. This book is called The Boy Who Cried Werewolf. The story follows the main character, Max, who is basically being driven over by his mother to his grandparents' place. They live in a cabin out in the woods, and there's some sort of mystique being built up in the story where, unfortunately, Max's father had passed away under some mysterious accident, some sort of hush-mouth circumstances, and he's going out there to his grandparents' place because they're sort of going to make him inherit some of his father's stuff, maybe build a sort of better connection and resonance with now his passed away father, because his father had grown up obviously in his grandparents' cabin and out in these woods. So it's sort of like a bonding moment, trying to reconnect. And of course he's a city boy, so he's far away from home. He's out in a very rural setting out in the woods. So it takes him a while to adjust. Obviously there's things that are different. There's farmhouses, livestock, and he's going to a place called Wolf County, appropriately named. And out here, there's some strange stories about livestock going missing, people potentially going missing. The population is crossed out from what it originally was. So that's kind of hinting on people have no longer been here. And his grandparents are acting sort of weird. They're sort of standoffish and hush-mouthed when it comes to talking about his father and maybe some secrets that are underlying these woods and area. And meanwhile, he starts getting intrigued because he's, after seeing a lot of his sort of dad's memorabilia and stuff there, he realizes that his father's death may have not been as accidental or as mysterious as he thought. The mystery surrounding his father's death might be tied to these woods and this location, and maybe something more that's out there than meets the eye. And he has to unravel this mystery, find out about what's going on, discover the secrets of his father's death, and understand how he can solve it, how he can resolve it, and what's really going on in these neck of the woods, no pun intended. So that's essentially the plot without me giving too much away, but I'll still go into details about it in terms of my points. So overall, this story involves a lot of just introducing the setting. You have Max exploring the woods, being forbidden from going deeper into the woods by his grandparents. They are very sort of reluctant for him to go out there. They warn him about dangers. And his grandpa even mentions about monsters ominously. And when he thinks that it's a joke to maybe scare him, it's sort of hinted that it's not a joke. There might actually be some creatures out there that could cause him harm. And he meets this girl named Jade, who's the next door neighbor. And his grandparents had told him not to speak to the neighbors, be wary of anybody, don't talk to strangers, which is very sort of constrictive. And when he talks to Jade, she's a very nice girl, you know, your typical girl around the block. But she ends up telling him a story about how in this town, hunters had gone out in the woods and hunted and killed off all the wolves because the wolves were being led by some creature, potentially a giant wolf, which walked bipedally on two legs and used to lead them. Livestock went missing, animals went missing, people started going missing. So you can kind of put two and two together. And there's even, you know, hints about the full moon, the moon cycle, his father having a lot of silver items that he used to carry when he went hunting, like a silver dagger. And even Max wears this red hoodie, which belonged to his father, that he wears throughout the story, and it's highlighted to have a silver zipper. So, you know, pretty obvious in terms of what may be going on within this story and the setting. And overall, I have to say that the main positives about this book that really shocked me was the mystery aspect was quite intriguing, although it is a little predictable and obvious where it's going. This story goes down a lot more emotional depth and just bigger details in terms of characterization, humanization, struggles, trauma, and stuff like that, that you would not see in almost any other kids' horror story. And if you do, it's very rare and it's sort of highlighted upon. The emotional depth that you go into with the second half of this book was fantastic because obviously you're dealing with the main character who's missing his father. He feels lonely. He feels like a part of himself is gone. He never got to understand or remember his father better because his father died when he was young. He's missing that connection. He wants to kind of connect with him from the afterlife in a certain way. And yet he has to deal with this grievance that there's mysteries behind his father's death. He needs closure. He needs to figure out what's going on. And yet people are trying to protect him, trying to keep him away from the truth. Is the truth a lot darker than you might imagine? He faces moments of confusion, betrayal in the story, things that kind of twist his perspective 180 degrees all around the corner. And his book is quite violent as well. You know, it homages the carcass things that happen in Fever Swamp. There's a lot of dead animal carcasses, rabbits being torn up, chickens being gone, and blood and feathers left behind, that sort of stuff. And there's even some action in terms of, you know, Max has to learn how to shoot a rifle, you know, to learn how to shoot a gun to maybe protect himself. He ends up actually, I was going to say it happens in the first half of the book, he actually ends up stabbing something in the eye. He stabs something in the eye, okay? I don't need to go too much in depth, but by the title of the book, you can probably figure out what I'm talking about. But yeah, he stabs it straight up in the eyeball, which is quite disturbing and also violent and also good because you don't usually see that in kids' horror books. So I thought that that was pretty rad. And I really can't go into depth about the second half of the book that I keep raving about because if I talk about the emotional depth of that second half of the story, some of the characterization you get, some of the story reveals and plot reveals that you get, the twists, it gets into spoiler content, and I'm going to spoil you on the book, and I don't want to do that. Again, it's a mystery, so if I tell you too much, there's not going to be much mystery to find out. But I was genuinely floored towards the back half of this book because the loneliness that the main character feels towards his father, the connection he feels towards his father, gets to a certain point where his life is at risk, his comfort is at risk, you know, life as he knows it is at risk, and yet he still accomplishes and performs some more mature decisions because he feels like he wants to represent his father. He wants to connect to his father. He wants to be with his father in some way, shape, or form. And I think that that's, you know, very powerful. the idea of wanting to have this thing which you've been missing your whole life, and a part of it is in you lying dormant and you don't want to confront it. I almost shed a tear towards the ending of this book because, there's some heartfelt conclusions, bittersweet, but heartfelt nonetheless, and some pretty clever ways that they're executed. And that last chapter is pretty damn clever. I can't talk about what it is, but if you read the book or if you've read it before, you know what I'm talking about. Now, the negatives about this book that stop me from feeling like it's a great book is the originality at certain points is lacking. It does kind of copy some Goosebumps plot lines, like, the title is homaging, the girl who cried monster. The actual story has a lot of werewolf of fever swamp elements in terms of the woods, the setting. There is, in fact, even a swamp and a swamp hermit, which is not very original. Although there is a scene where they're looking, him and Jade are out in the woods at night, and he's looking at the window where yellow light is coming from, and it's the silhouette of the swamp hermit, and his body is contorting and twisting, and it's described that it looks like something is trying to claw its way out of his body, and they get into some terrifying scenes after that. So the writing itself and the action is good, but the originality is lacking, and there's even some elements of werewolf skin in the story, especially towards that second half. So because there's a lack of originality at certain points, it sort of takes it away from the very good parts of the book. And this all sort of occurs in the first half. The first half and some bits of the second half is sort of kind of letting you know that it's copying things from other books, which is not necessarily a bad thing, especially if you put your own spin on it. Of course, R.L. Stine, had taken inspiration from things and did his own spin on it, but there's a little too much copying at certain points that it's just like, okay, somebody who's read Werewolf of Fever Swamp, Werewolf Skin, or other books could probably recognize these things and just, sort of kind of be drawn away from that. And a pet peeve of mine is that more so towards the first half of this book, the thing about Goosebumps is that even though Goosebumps is a kids' horror series, the writing is mature in the way that when you're reading the book, the reason why that these books are considered to be timeless for Goosebumps, and a lot of adults read them and are still able to enjoy them, and they even admit so, even though they haven't read these books in a while, is because the fact that it's written competent, all right? It's written as if the kid that's reading it is competent. Adults can read it and immerse themselves within the perspective, but still sort of enjoy the story without too much being given away. Here, there's constant emphasis on the full moon, the moon cycles, like when he's wearing the red hoodie, it's specifically highlighted that, it came with the silver zipper, a silver dagger. It's like, okay, we get it, a little bit ad nauseum that this is a werewolf story. And even the character, Max, his last name is Blood Knight. So the two main kid characters in this story are named Max Blood Knight and Jade Howler. All right, her family is called the Howlers, and his family is called the Blood Knights. It's like, really? Like, do you need that much sort of childish extra writing? Because the second half of the book, as I mentioned, is more emotionally in-depth. It's one of the most emotionally gripping things you could read within a kid's horror story. Very mature, very leveled up in terms of the writing. And again, I even got a little emotional towards the end. I was like, okay, this is hidden some places you don't see in other kids' horror stories. So then why have that childish writing? Why write like a kindergartner's writing it? Also, the kid is like shooting a gun. The kid is stabbing some creatures out there. There's mutilated animal carcasses. So the book is going dark. The book is going more mature. And then it's contradicted. It's juxtaposed in a bad sense by that very childish writing. And then the originality of the book, the things that make it very good, are juxtaposed by the fact that it's copying a little too much from other books. So overall, I would give this book, honestly, like an 8.5 out of 10, maybe even like an 8.8, somewhere between there. This is a very good book. And I think that if you read it, and you especially read it all the way through, it is 150 pages, a little longer than your typical kids' horror book, but I think you'll really enjoy it. I think that if you go in with the open mind, you're going to be shocked, you're going to be impressed. And I've heard the general consensus that people think that the first book and last book so far from the series is not of that high quality, but I disagree. The first book is pretty high quality in terms of werewolf stories, and I think that it does some things better. Is it necessarily the most original? Not at all. Is the writing as mature as Goosebumps? No. But the content of the story itself is going out there. and I think it makes it memorable, and I think it makes it well written. And it leaves you there with the sense of you're satisfied. This to me almost feels like if Are You Afraid of the Dark had seriously taken a swing at making a story similar to Fever Swamp or Werewolf Skin or something akin to that. If Are You Afraid of the Dark wanted to make a werewolf story to compete against things like Fever Swamp and those type of Goosebumps werewolf stories, and they did it seriously, not like that Tale of the Full Moon, which is some comedic bullshit. No, actual serious take. This is what it would feel like, in my opinion. And reading the entire thing sort of solidified that for me. So yeah, it gets an 8.5 out of 10. It's a very good story. I am impressed by it, and I'm excited to read more Monsterstreet. I heard good things about it, and yeah, I'm looking forward to some of the more crazier books. I've heard some concepts, some titles, and they sound pretty fun. And yeah, that's all I got for today. You got a new kids horror recommendation from your boy, the Horrorlander, and that goes to Monsterstreet, book number 1, The Boy Who Cried Werewolf. So yeah, good job, JH Reynolds. That's all she wrote, folks. That's all I got for today. If you enjoyed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and comment down below. Have you read the Monsterstreet books before? What are your thoughts about them? If not, I suggest you go check them out and maybe give them a read. Or let me know some other kids' horror series books you want me to read outside of Goosebumps, because I know you guys are going to comment that. So yeah, have a great day. Stay cool, stay classy, stay chill, stay happy, stay smiling, and enjoy the nice summer. Deuces.
アリーベ・デルチ